Reinforcements have arrived.
Yes, sir. Very well.
Waiting orders.
Affirmative. Yes, sir. Very well.
Acknowledged.
Reporting.
Affirmative.
Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Ready and waiting.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very well. Yes, sir. Very well. Yes, sir.
Ready and waiting.
Yes, sir.
Reporting.
Very well.
Waiting orders.
Agreed. Yes, sir. At once.
Ready and waiting.
Very well.
Waiting orders.
Very well.
Waiting orders.
Affirmative.
Acknowledged.
Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Agreed. Affirmative.
Mission saved.
Reporting. At once.
Mission
Ready
loaded.
and waiting. Very well. Awaiting
At
orders.
ready and waiting.
At once. Very well. At once. Yes, sir.
Warning.
Affirmative.
Large
Affirmative. Yes, sir.
unit
Very well.
remaining.
Reporting. Yes, sir. Agreed. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Agreed. Very well. At once. Agreed. Agreed. Affirmative. Very well. Agreed. Very well. Affirmative. At once. Very well. Agreed. Very well.
Mission saved.
Yes, sir. Very well.
Lost. Mission loaded.
Affirmative. Agreed. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Unit lost. Mission
Very
loaded.
well. Agreed. Agreed. Affirmative. 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 Agreed. Affirmative. 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 Very well. Affirmative. 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 At once. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. Very well. Yes, sir. Very well.
Mission loaded.
At once. Affirmative. 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 Agreed. At once. At once. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Agreed. Affirmative. 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 Very well. Agreed. Affirmative. At once. Very well. Agreed. Affirmative. Agreed.
Mission saved.
Very well. Very well. Yes, sir. Very well. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Mission loaded.
Very well. Affirmative. At once. Very well. Affirmative. At once. Yes, sir. Of course. Yes, sir. At once. Of course. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Mission loaded.
Very well. Affirmative. Affirmative. Very well. Very well. Very well. Agreed. Agreed. Very well. Affirmative. At once. At once.
Unit lost. Mission loaded.
At once. Very well. At once. Very well.
Mission loaded.
At once. Agreed. Reporting. Very well.
Mission loaded.
Agreed. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. At once.
Mission
Very
loaded.
well. Affirmative. Agreed. Affirmative. 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 Very well. At once. Agreed. At once. Agreed. Yes, sir. Agreed. Affirmative. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. Agreed. Agreed. Very well. At once. Very well. Yes, sir. Of course. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. At once.
Unit lost. Mission loaded.
At once. Affirmative. Affirmative. Agreed. Very well. Agreed. Affirmative.
Mission
At
loaded.
once. Affirmative. 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 Very well. At once. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. Affirmative. At
Unit
once.
lost. Mission loaded.
Affirmative. At once. Affirmative. At once. At once. Affirmative. Very well. Of course. At once. Very well. Very well. Very well. Agreed. Affirmative. Very well. Agreed. Affirmative. Agreed. At once. Affirmative. 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 Yes, sir. Very well. Affirmative. Agreed. At once. Agreed. Affirmative. Agreed. Affirmative. Agreed. Agreed. Affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Acknowledged. Acknowledged. Affirmative. Waiting orders. Agreed. Reporting. Yes, sir. Very well. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. Very well. Agreed.
Unit lost. Mission loaded.
Affirmative. At once. Affirmative. Very well. Very well. Affirmative. Ready and waiting. Once. Agreed. Very well. Agreed. Agreed. Very well. Agreed. Very well. Very well. At once. Affirmative. At once. At very once. Well. At once.
Unit lost. Mission loaded.
Affirmative. Very well. Agreed. At once. Agreed. Very well. Very well. At once. At once. Very well. At once. Very well. Very well. Affirmative. Very well. Yes, sir. Very well. Affirmative. Reporting. Once. Acknowledged. Agreed. Ready and waiting. Reporting. Affirmative. Reporting. Reporting. Affirmative. Very well. Agreed. At once. Affirmative. Affirmative. Very well. At once. Very well. Very well. Very well. Very well. Affirmative. Awaiting orders. Affirmative. Awaiting orders. Reporting. At once. Acknowledged. Agreed. At once. Affirmative. Affirmative. At once. Very well. Very well. Affirmative. Very well. At once.
Mission saved. Mission loaded.
Agreed. Awaiting very orders. Well. Affirmative. Very well. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Agreed.
Warning.
Agreed.
1 minute
Agreed.
remaining.
At once. Agreed. Very well. Affirmative. 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 Very well. Affirmative. Agreed. Affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Of course. Yes, sir.
Unit lost. Mission loaded.
Ready and waiting. Very well. Agreed. Affirmative.
Warning.
At
1
once.
minute
Affirmative.
remaining.
Affirmative. At once. Affirmative. Affirmative. Very well. Very well. At once. Agreed. Very well. Affirmative. 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 At once. Yes, sir.
Mission loaded.
Acknowledged. Agreed. At once. Very well.
Mission saved.
Agreed.
Warning.
Affirmative.
1
Agreed.
minute
Affirmative.
remaining.
Affirmative. At once. Affirmative. At once. Agreed. Affirmative. 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 Very well. Affirmative. Waiting orders. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. Agreed. At once. Yes, sir.
Unit lost. Mission loaded.
At once.
Warning. 1 minute
At once.
remaining.
Affirmative. At once. Affirmative. Very well. At once. Agreed. At once. Agreed. Agreed. Affirmative. Very well. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Mission loaded. Mission
Reporting.
loaded.
At
Warning.
once.
1 minute remaining.
At once. At once. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. Agreed. Very well.
Mission saved.
Agreed. Affirmative. At once. Reporting. Affirmative. Agreed. At once. Of course. Very well. Affirmative. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Unit lost. Mission
Agreed.
loaded.
Reporting. Agreed. Affirmative. 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 Very well. Affirmative. Agreed. Waiting orders. Waiting orders. Waiting orders.
Mission loaded.
Acknowledged. Agreed. At once. Affirmative. Very well.
Mission saved.
Affirmative. Very well.
Warning,
Agreed.
1 minute
At
remaining.
once. Affirmative. Affirmative. Very well.
Mission saved.
Yes, sir.
Unit lost. Mission loaded.
Agreed. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very well.
Mission
At
loaded.
once. Affirmative. Very well. At once. Agreed. Agreed. Affirmative. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. Affirmative. At once. Affirmative. Affirmative. At once. At once. Very well. Very well. Affirmative. At once. Very well. Very well. Agreed. Very well. Affirmative. Affirmative. At once. Agreed. Agreed.
Unit lost. Mission loaded.
Very well. Affirmative. At once.
Mission loaded.
Yes, sir. Agreed. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. At once. Affirmative. Yes, sir.
Warning, 1 minute remaining.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Very well. Very well. At once. Very well. Affirmative. Affirmative. At once. Agreed. Affirmative. Very well. Very well. Very well. Agreed. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative.
Unit lost. Mission loaded.
At once. Agreed. Very well. Affirmative. Agreed. Affirmative. Yes, sir.
Unit lost. Mission loaded.
At once. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Unit lost. Mission loaded.
Very well. Affirmative. Yes, sir.
Mission
At
loaded.
once. At once. Very well. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Unit lost. Mission loaded.
Affirmative. Affirmative. Agreed. Ready and waiting. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Waiting orders. Affirmative. Waiting orders. Very well. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Warning, 1
Affirmative.
minute remaining.
Affirmative. Agreed. Affirmative. Agreed. 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 Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. Very well. Of course. At once. At once. Very well. Agreed. Affirmative.
Mission saved.
Very well. Very well. Agreed. Affirmative. Affirmative. Very well. Very well. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. Very well. Very well. Very well. Agreed. At once. At once. Agreed. Agreed. At once. Affirmative. At once. Agreed. Agreed. At once.
Unit lost. Mission failed. Mission loaded.
Very well. At once. At once. Affirmative. Affirmative. At once. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. 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 Agreed. Agreed. At once. At once. Agreed. Agreed. Affirmative. Affirmative. Agreed. Very well. Very well. Waiting orders. Affirmative. Very well. At once. Affirmative. Affirmative. Agreed. Affirmative. Affirmative. Agreed. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. Of course. Yes, sir. Agreed. Very well. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Affirmative. At once. Affirmative. Affirmative. Ready and waiting. Affirmative. Reporting. At once. Reporting. Affirmative. Waiting very well. Reporting. Affirmative. Reporting. Affirmative. Reporting. At once. Affirmative. Affirmative. At once. Very well. Affirmative. Affirmative. Very well. At once. Affirmative. Agreed. Agreed. Very well. Affirmative. Agreed. At once. Agreed. Very well. Affirmative. Agreed. Very well. Ready and waiting. Reporting. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Agreed. Very well. Ready and waiting. Agreed. Waiting orders. At once. Yes, sir.
Mission saved.
Very well. Report affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. Very well. At once. Affirmative. Agreed. At once. Very well. Affirmative. At once. Very well. Affirmative. Affirmative. Very well. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very well. Affirmative. At once.
Mission saved.
Very well. Agreed.
Mission
At
closed.
once. Reporting. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Agreed. Affirmative. Agreed. Very well. Yes, sir. Agreed. Yes, sir. Very well. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Agreed. Reporting. At once. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Very well. Very well. Affirmative. Agreed. At once. Yes, sir. Very well. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Agreed. Reporting. Yes, sir. Agreed. Of course. Affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very well. Affirmative. At once. At once. At once. Affirmative. 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 Agreed. Very well. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. At once. Very well. Agreed. At once. Affirmative. Affirmative. Agreed. At once. Affirmative. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative.
Unit lost. Mission loaded.
Agreed. Affirmative. Agreed. Very well. Affirmative. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. Of course. At once. Yes, sir. Affirmative. At once. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Unit lost. Mission loaded.
Affirmative. At once. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. At once. Affirmative. 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 At once. Affirmative. 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 Agreed. Agreed. Very well. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Unit lost. Mission
Very well.
loaded.
Very well. At once. Affirmative. Agreed. At once. At once. Very well. Affirmative. Affirmative. At once. Very well. Agreed. Agreed. Affirmative. At once. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Affirmative.
Mission saved.
At once. Affirmative. Affirmative. Awaiting orders. At once. Affirmative. At once. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Agreed. At once. Ready and waiting. Agreed. Yes, sir. At once. Yes, sir. Very well. At once. Affirmative. At once. Very well. Agreed. Agreed. Affirmative. At once. Affirmative. Affirmative. At once. Affirmative. At once. Agreed. Affirmative. 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 At once. Agreed. At once. Agreed. Affirmative. Affirmative. Agreed. At once. Agreed. Very well. Affirmative. Agreed. Affirmative. At once. Agreed. Affirmative. At once. Agreed. Agreed. Very well. At once. Agreed. Of course. Of course. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Affirmative. At once. Very well. Affirmative. Agreed. Agreed. At once. Yes, sir. Very well.
Unit lost. Mission loaded.
At once. Affirmative. Report agreed. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Affirmative. Very well. Agreed. Affirmative. At once.
Unit lost. Mission
Affirmative.
loaded.
Affirmative. Agreed. Very well. At once. Very well. Affirmative. 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 At once. Very well. At once. At once. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. Very well. At once. Affirmative.
Unit lost. Mission loaded.
Agreed. Affirmative. Very well. Agreed. Affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir. Reporting. Very well. Yes, sir. Of course. Affirmative. Of course.
Unit lost. Mission
Very
loaded.
well. Affirmative. Affirmative. Yes, sir. At once. Affirmative. Very well. Agreed. Affirmative. 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 Agreed. Agreed. Very well. Affirmative. Very well. Very well. Very well. At once. Affirmative. At once. At once. Very well. Agreed. Affirmative. At once. Agreed. Agreed. Affirmative. Affirmative. Very well. Affirmative. Affirmative.
Mission saved.
Affirmative. Agreed. At once.
Unit lost. Mission loaded.
At once. Agreed. Affirmative. 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 Agreed. Very well. Affirmative. Yes, sir.
Unit lost. Mission loaded.
Affirmative. At once. Affirmative. Agreed. Agreed. Affirmative. Affirmative. At once. At once. Affirmative. Very well. Yes, sir. Of course.
Mission accomplished.